Hello, good evening, and welcome to everyone. It's my honor and privilege to invite all of you to today evening's webinar. First, let me begin by congratulating each one of you for standing up for Aarey, for creating one of the largest, citizens and one of the longest ongoing initiative and engaging in what I would call as the democratic process of governance. We have to realize that if citizens have to retain their rights and privileges, then we have to engage with all the pillars of democracy, be it legislation, that is our elected representatives, our executive bodies, the IAS officers, government officials, the media, which is the watchdog, and which disseminates all the ideas and information to public. And finally, the judiciary, which helps us ensure smooth functioning of all the laws. In the last 5-6 years, citizens have engaged in all these four pillars of democracy. They've engaged in writing letters to the government, taking parts in rallies, in human chain. Awareness drives have been conducted in schools, colleges, in housing colonies, in corporate groups. There have been various engagements and interactions with government, whether it is with, the tree, when the tree cutting plans were there, so with the tree authority. And last not the least, filing of public interest litigations and being present in court when hearings etc. are happening. Entire days, all of us have spent in fighting for Aarey. But when there is a counter and confusing narrative that is created, then the citizens and media and judiciary, they get confused. And at such a point of time, we need to understand the subject from an expert's point of view, who can tell us what are the multifarious issues related with urban development. And today's webinar is one such citizen initiative, citizen expert initiative, which through which we are going to declutter the narrative and put forward what are the opportunities and ideas that are possible that we can engage with, especially in trying to create an integrated transportation and urban development plan, such that development and environmental sustainability can go hand in hand, and we don't sink into a debt trap. So we'll start with today evening. We have got 3 panelists. The first, we're going to start with Hussain. Hussain Indorewala. He's in. Just one second. Hussain Indorewala is a teacher and urban researcher and activist. He teaches planning theory, housing, and humanities at the Kamala Raheja Vidyanidhi Institute of Architecture and heads the research and consultancy cell of the institute. His research work has focused on urban politics and ideology, planning epistemology, urban history, and urban political economy. He works closely with community groups through Collective for Spatial and Alternatives, that is CSA, and Action Research and Advocacy Collective. And today he's going to introduce us to the long history of transportation and the various challenges that we have as the city explodes with human population. So over to you, Hussain.
Yeah, Anand, can you hear me?
Yes.
And can you see my presentation?
Yes, we're clear.
Okay. Just tell me if when I go on slideshow, can you still see my presentation? Still visible?
It's opening. We can yet see your original slide.
Okay.
So for those who've joined in along with us now through Facebook, just to request that you can type in your questions and we will be taking them at the end of all the 3 presentations. Yeah, we can see you, Hussain. You're live.
You can see my screen now.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks a lot for inviting me to speak in this forum, and I must begin by congratulating the Aarey Conservation Group for the sustained and relentless struggle which led to this um, remarkable and landmark political decision. All credit to the Aarey Conservation Group and all the people who have tirelessly worked to make it possible. Um, my presentation today, in fact, is not so much about Aarey. Actually, it's hardly about Aarey. It's more about public transport in Mumbai. And in a way, it's a kind of laying out a little bit of context to, as a prelude to what Nitin is going to be presenting later. And so this is what I intend to do. I'm going to basically explore a few questions about public transport generally, and how Mumbai has been dealing with this question for a while now. So let me start. Can you see this, Anand? Is it visible graphic?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a very important graphic for all of, for everybody in Mumbai. This actually shows the modal shares of the city's various transport system, the city's transport system. Modal share is a term that traffic planners use to talk about what are the various modes that people are using and what percentage of those modes are being used for transit in the city. Now, a mode, when transport planners talk about transportation, they use a term called trips. So if you, for instance, leave your house and go to a workplace and come back, you've made two trips, so if you add all the trips that all the people in the city make, and you kind of divide them up into based on the different modes that you've used, whether it's railways, buses, and so on, you will get a sense of the modal shares. Now, this graphic shows actually four timelines, for specific moments in the city's history: 98, 2008, 2018, and there's a projection to 2024 as well. And as you can see, in 1998, about, in Mumbai, about 74% of people used either the suburban railway system or the BEST as a mode of travel, which is a very high modal share. Actually, Mumbai is one of the few cities, maybe in the world, where the modal share for public transport is so high, and which is one of the reasons why the city has been able to, become what it is able to accommodate the kind of high density living and so on. But if you see over the years, this has changed quite significantly. In 2008, already the public transport trips dropped to about 72.9%, and in 2018 it has dropped to 55.7%. Whereas the private transport modes and especially personal vehicles have increased quite significantly. And in fact, this you can see also in the way in which the number of cars in the city have increased. In 98, there were about 250,000 cars in Mumbai. In 2008, there were 500,000. In 2018, there are 1 million. And it's increasing. So, almost every 10 years, we double the number of cars on the streets. Now, one can wonder why this is happening. Generally, it is assumed that people use cars when, the average incomes increase, or when people prefer a lifestyle change and so on. But very important to understand is that policy, actually, transport policy drives this change in behavior. In fact, we have been investing heavily over the years in freeways, C-links, and all kinds of, those 50 flyovers and much else, the JVLR, SCLR, all of these arterial routes, which has encouraged people to switch to, private vehicular modes. So the shift in transport is actually induced by investment in private vehicular transport. And this is a very important point to understand, that people don't choose cars because they can afford them, but but people choose cars because we are investing heavily in them. In comparison, if you look at how much or what is the level of investment in public transport modes, it is quite, uh, a little discouraging. In fact, there is systematic disinvestment in BEST, which till very recently was one of the major, the the core road-based public transport systems in the city. So this graphic indicates trends, and when we talk about the kind of crisis that we face in the coming years due to global warming, sea level rise, and so on, this is a graphic that should create considerable alarm. Okay, so the next question really is that what causes traffic jams and congestion in Mumbai? Um, One of the things that people generally tend to believe is that traffic congestion is caused by taxis, autos, buses. But if you see the amount of road space that is taken up by different modes, it reveals a very different picture. So everybody understands this, and there are all kinds of very interesting illustrations which indicate that buses actually carry many more people and consume much less road space, and which is obvious if you think about it. And if you do this, so this table basically shows the vehicular size and the number of vehicles and the road space occupied. And if you see the pie chart next to the table, it shows that the BEST buses actually, which which has a considerably large, about 25 lakh people per day, it moves. It occupies just 1.1% of the road space, whereas cars, which move about 12 to 14% of the trips, occupy 60% of road space. So cars are not just inefficient in terms of fuel consumption, but they also take up a lot of space, and they take up a lot of land in the city, not just for roads, but if you use a car, you know that you need at least 2 parking spaces in your home and in your workplace. But that's not it, because you also use the car to go shopping and other things. So generally, when traffic planners think about the kind of parking requirements for cars in aggregate, they think of 3 parking spaces per car. So now you add up all the parking spaces for 1 million cars, you're basically talking about 3 million parking spaces. That requires land, or that requires built up space, and that is also something which is of great concern. So clearly, cars are far from being a solution for any city, but it's much less. It's even worse for a city like Mumbai. So where are Mumbai's traffic planners investing? And if you think about this, and if you see this is a table which shows a few big ticket projects in recent years: the Coastal Road, Bandra-Versova Sea Link, Bandra-Worli Sea Link, Harbour Link, Metro Line 3, and a proposed project which I have cooked up in my head, which is the BRTS on the Western Express Highway. But what is important here is, if you look at, so what I've done here is I have um, done a calculation, and all of these numbers actually come from government sources. They come from either the DPRs or from figures that the authorities have used to do their various cost and benefit analyses. And if you look at the last column, which is cost per trip per kilometer for 20 years, which is how much, to understand that figure, basically it's how much of money are we spending to move one person on that mode of, on that project, and basically over 20 years. So if you look at these numbers, for the coastal road, it is 22 rupees per trip. So every person who's going to drive on that coastal road, the city has spent 22 rupees to put that person on that road. Bandra-Worli Versova Sea Link is 15, and so on. And if you look at the last one, BRTS and Western Express Highway, it's 18 paise. Metro Line 3 is very low, also because it's, first of all, it has a high estimated ridership. And, we know with many of these government projects that the benefits are a little exaggerated, the costs are a little underplayed. But even if you go by the projected benefits of the metro, it is arguably 4 times more expensive than a bus on the Western Express Highway, a bus lane on the Western Express Highway. So what is the energy cost and emissions of various modes of transport? And this is again very important, thinking about climate change. Uh, you know, when we talk about the concerns of mega projects on the environment, Aarey, for example, or the coastal ecology in the case of the coastal road, for example, it's important not to be very focused only on local impacts. When we are, if you build a freeway, you are inducing more people to use four-wheelers, which means more emissions, which means more carbon in the atmosphere, which means a greater impact in terms of in terms of climate change. So, if you think about this, what is the energy cost? If you look at the suburban railway system, it costs 25 paise fuel. These are fuel costs, right? So it costs 25 paise fuel costs to move one person per kilometer on the suburban rail system. For buses, it's 60 paise approximately. For metros, it's 2 rupees. For two-wheelers, it's 2.66, and for four-wheelers, it's 5.5. But if you think about where is the city investing primarily in terms of infrastructure investments, you'll see that it's usually in the bottom three, not so much in the first two, which means that we are more and more getting people to use modes of transport which are going to create, not just take up more city space in the city, gobble up more land in the city and ecological resources, but also create behavior that is going to accelerate the amount of carbon emitted and therefore the impacts of climate change. Now, this is a very interesting comparison between these two projects and their detailed project reports. The Metro 3 had a DPR and the Coastal Road had a DPR. And both these projects were justified as in terms of reducing pollution. But they had interesting differences. The Metro project report claimed that the Metro is going to reduce the number of cars on the road and therefore reduce air pollution. The Coastal Road DPR, on the other hand, said that it will help cars move faster and therefore reduce pollution. Now, in a sense, these are at cross purposes, because if the objective is to reduce cars, then why would you want them to go faster? Well, I mean, the truth of the matter is neither the metro nor the coastal road is actually going to affect use very much. In fact, one of the reasons why metros have acceptance, broadly speaking, is because they do not affect the demand for cars or the use of cars. And if you think about it, it's actually it makes sense. If you build a metro on an arterial road, let's say, there will be people who will move to the metro, but it will also clear up more road space for cars, which means that over time, the road space that is released will be taken over by car users, who will increase over time. So the metro doesn't necessarily reduce car use. In the short term, maybe it does, but in the long term, it does not. The coastal road obviously has nothing to do with reducing car use. In fact, it induces traffic. So but of course, official justifications are always made in a manner that suit the project proponents, and this is what they were doing in both of these. So, just a little bit of an outline of the history of the metro system. Now, um, the I mean, till the 1850s, before and up till the 1850s, was what we call the pre-mechanization era, where predominantly the mode of transport was walking or animal-based transport. This was, and if you think about cities at that time, they were fairly small. City form and city size was to a large extent an outcome of the main modes of transport that people used. Between 1850 and 1920, new technologies started emerging, such as steam engine, rail, tram, bicycle, and this was again a little before or just around the time when the pneumatic tire was invented. So when you had to move heavy vehicles, rails were the most where the best way of doing that, it would lead to basically the best or the most comfortable mode of transport, because wheeled traffic would not be so comfortable. Between 1920 and 1950 was what's called the metro bus and car era, where you had the rise of these three modes of transport. Now, pneumatic tires came in. These vehicles became, much more comfortable, and therefore buses and cars started, number of buses and cars started growing. But at this point, metros, if you think about it, were a little more comfortable and convenient as compared to cars. Cars were, at that time, not as as comfortable as they are today. Not air conditioned, so you would generally uh, breathe smoke and dust and so on. And so the middle classes actually preferred to use metros over cars. There was a political demand for metro systems, and therefore a lot of metro systems were built at that time. There was also a way in which those metro systems were built. A lot of them were underground. And
Hussain. I think Hussain is experiencing some internet issues. Are you there, Hussain? So while we are waiting for Hussain to reconnect, I would request all those listening in from Facebook Live, if there are any questions related to Hussain's presentation, we'll be taking them all at the end together with all the three panelists. But please type them in any of the chat windows that you have, either on Zoom or on Facebook Live. I think Hussain has probably dropped out from the presentation. Hussain, are you there? Uh, to add a few points to what Hussain was speaking about, and to give you a little brief history as to why this whole discussion is being undertaken today. What is the background? Some of the viewers had asked that what is the agenda of this today's webinar. तो थोड़ा आपको उसका background अगर मैं दे सकूं तो फिलहाल तो हमने एक step आगे लिया है while communicating and all the engagements that we've created with the government and with the ruling political party. What needs to continue is for all the citizens. हमको सबको ये समझना है कि हमारी ज़रूरत क्या है, what are the right forms of development ideas that are there, whether हम ये development sustainably कर सकते हैं क्या, आरे को बचा सकते हैं क्या, उसके साथ पवाई लेक को बचा सकते हैं क्या, हमारे जो ग्रीन स्पेसेस है, हमारा एनवायरनमेंट, चाहे वो मैनग्रोव्स हो, चाहे वो ग्रासलैंड्स हो, चाहे वो ओपन स्पेसेस हो, तो ये सारी चीजें हम कैसे हमारे करंट डेवलपमेंटल आइडियोलॉजीज में इंटीग्रेट कर सके. बॉम्बे ऑलरेडी बहुत कंजेस्टेड है, हमारे रोड्स काफी नैरो है कई जगह पे, whether you consider LBS मार्ग, whether you consider SV road, some of these areas are very very congested. पर ये एक बताया जा रहा है कि हमको ये सारे जो मेट्रो प्रोजेक्ट्स है, ये हम 5-6 साल में करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. आप दूसरे कंट्रीज में देखेंगे तो ये प्रोजेक्ट्स 100 साल से ज्यादा इन्होंने टाइम लिया था, और हम यही चीज 5-6 सालों में करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. Hussain, are you back? Can you hear me, Hussain? You're not audible.
You can hear me, Anand?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, my laptop just crashed.
Yeah.
So I'll just
almost up.
Anyway, I've overshot. Yeah. Anyway, I've
Yeah.
overshot. So I'll just very quickly end with a few more remarks on the metro, and then I'll end. So what I was saying was, so there was definitely a large political demand for the metro in the between 20s and 50s, and that's how you find these systems were invested in quite a bit. I mean, the conditions in Indian cities or cities in low-income countries is fairly different. First of all, in Mumbai, if you see, there is a large reliance on two-wheeler transport, which was not the case when metro systems came up in the West, for instance. Also, it's important to bear in mind that metro technology largely comes from the developed world, whereas they don't have the demand for metro systems anymore. So they are technologies which are kind of pushed in developing countries, and these countries have attractive policies like soft loans and so on, which encourage low-income countries to switch to metros, and that's how we've seen a lot of desire to build metro systems in the city, in our cities. In Mumbai, for instance, I mean, if you think about it, a large number of our metro lines are over arterial roads, and if there is an advantage in the metro, it is that it can actually connect parts of the city which are hitherto unconnected. But if you build metros on major roads, you are actually reproducing the travel patterns that already exist. You're not changing them at all, which metros can do. And the Line 3 in a way does that, but the other metro networks don't. So it's important actually for us to think about this a little carefully, and wherever possible, if we can substitute the metro routes for bus lanes or dedicated bus corridors, we should do that. Dedicated bus corridors are very, very low cost as compared to metros. They don't require a lot of investment. They work with the existing bus transport system. We have a very good public transport system in BEST, which can basically benefit, in fact, from the dedicated corridors. So we should do that. And yeah, many cities subsidize heavily their bus transport systems, but in Mumbai, the BST has been squeezed quite a bit. In fact, the subsidy system that existed in BST has been removed, and now the BST is being, in order for pushing privatization of BST, the BMC and the BST management and the state government refuses to support BST financially, which is causing serious problems. The BST ridership over the past 7-8 years has declined dramatically. The number of buses have reduced and so on. So these are serious concerns from the public transport planning perspective. And I think the important point for us to is to think about how do we create accessible and affordable public transport that keeping in mind that we have to be able to create a system which moves people, consuming less energy, destroying less of our ecology, and consuming less land, gobbling up less land. And for that, we have to choose bus-based and surface rail transport systems over highways, freeways, and elevated rail. This is all I want to say. Maybe I can take up some more questions in the discussion.
Thank you, Hussain. I think he's opened out a lot of ideas and questions, and we'll be taking that up in the question Q&A session later. So Hussain concluded by saying that while we are doing all this, the ecology and our entire the amazing location, the geography that we enjoy with Bombay, that needs to be also conserved. And to follow up from Hussain, we have Shweta Wagh with us. She's going to be talking about mapping of Aarey and the ecological location. What's the ecological speciality of the place, the hydrology, etc. that they have mapped extensively. To introduce Shweta, she's also she's an architect, and she has a bachelor's and master's degree in urban conservation. And she has been teaching since 2009 at the undergraduate and postgraduate level, especially concentrating on ecological restoration, geomorphology, then field botany, natural resource management, and biodiversity conservation in the Kamla Raheja Vidyanidhi Institute for Architecture. And some of her work includes creating conservation frameworks for the Kanchenjunga sacred landscape in Sikkim, then closer to home to Bombay, the Matheran eco-sensitive zone, the geothermal zone in the Tansa River Basin, and the artisanal fishing villages in Mumbai. So over to you, Shweta, and we'll now see a completely different side of the Aarey that some of you might have not witnessed, and how the Methi and the Oshiwara River Basin that exists in Aarey and why it is so important that we protect this whole landscape. To you, Shweta. Shweta, can you? Shweta, your sound voice is not coming. If you can.
Yeah, I'm trying. Yeah. Okay.
So while Shweta is setting up her presentation, I'd like to add a few other points over here that the whole presentation, the three presentations are going to put forward to you all the different possibilities. We are set in such a scenario that with great designing, with thinking processes of ecologists, with social rights, thinking about the tribals of Aarey, thinking about what are the architectural possibilities that are there, whether through design, through intelligent design, can we rethink what we have, or rather, should we just hurtle, in a certain direction, and or what will be the economic costs of all these projects that we are, trying to put forward in the next 5 to 10 years? How are we going to, be able to cope up with the burden, and how will citizens pay back this debt that we are taking from all the international agencies? So, Shweta, if you're ready, we can start.
Can you hear me now, Anand?
Yes, we can hear you. Thanks.
Okay, okay, great. Yeah, so
You can share your screen, please.
yeah, I'll just share my screen. Yeah, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Are you able to see the screen? Okay, so
Yeah.
okay, I think I'll start. Okay, my
A little louder,
presentation
please,
today
Shweta.
is titled Towards an Ecological Planning Approach, Mapping Aarey Towards an Ecological Planning Approach for Conservation. Today, I'll be presenting a mapping report of Aarey, which we had done last year. And this was undertaken as a part of the KRVI Research and Design Cell.
Shweta, your sound is a little low. Can you speak a little louder?
Yeah. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, clear.
Okay. So my presentation for today is titled Towards an Ecological Mapping Aarey Towards an Ecological Planning Approach for Conservation. Today I'll be presenting a mapping report of Aarey, which was undertaken last year as a part of the KRVI Research and Design Cell. This is the institute where I teach. This study provides a qualitative spatial analysis to highlight the impacts of past and proposed land use, land cover changes in Aarey on its river catchments and ecosystems. So Aarey is, as we can see in the first map on this slide, Aarey is contiguous with the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, and which is an area where also two of the city's rivers originate, the Oshivra and the Mithi rivers. Rivers and streams are an important part of the hydrological cycle and are, in fact, contiguous ecological systems which connect the source regions in the hills to the estuarine regions towards the western shore. The major rivers in Mumbai originate in the hilly core of Salsette Island. That is also the area largely covered by Sanjay Gandhi National Park and also the buffer areas such as Aarey. We identified the catchment areas of the Mithi and Oshivra rivers. The Mithi River originates in Sanjay Gandhi National Park and Aarey, and the Oshivra River, in fact, originates in Aarey colony itself. Natural drainage channels are of critical importance in a coastal city like Mumbai, and therefore Aarey, which constitutes an area where both these rivers originate, fits the criteria of very high ecological significance and demands both conservation and protection. In fact, the Pranab Sen committee report, which identified the criteria for identification of ecologically sensitive areas, which was prepared in the year 2000, identifies areas where rivers originate as so compelling in terms of ecological significance that they do not require any other justification for preservation and conservation. The four maps on this slide indicate the broad land cover changes in the catchments of the Mithi and Oshibra rivers between the year 1926 and 2019. A mapping of land cover change over the years shows a substantial increase in development intensity and built up or concretized areas in the catchment areas of the two rivers, with the exception of a few areas, including Aarey, the SGNP, and surrounding hilly areas. These areas are the protected areas, which are either a part of the national park or were earlier a part of the NDZ, which Aarey was a part of. Aarey has therefore remained a low development zone with extensive forest cover and open areas, which provide a sizable permeable area for rainwater infiltration and groundwater recharge. The land cover map of 2019 shows some degree of fragmentation of forest and natural vegetation cover in Aarey and surrounding areas. However, much of the vegetation and natural cover is still intact. Opening up Aarey to a similar built-up intensity as the remaining areas of the catchment will impact both its ecological and biodiversity values and the various ecosystem services that it provides for the city. Several experts have identified the ecological significance of Aarey and also the various kinds of ecological services that Aarey provides. In fact, experts have identified various kinds of habitats in the Aarey colony area, including the scrub forest, seasonal freshwater marshes, hillocks with different degrees of vegetation cover, rocky outcrops, grassland, and scrub, which sustain diverse forms of flora and fauna and make the area significant for its biodiversity. This area is also contiguous with and serves as a buffer zone for the protected area of the Sanjay Gandhi National Park. The vegetation of Aarey being contiguous with that of the national park is also similar in composition with that of the national park. So another important aspect which contributes to its ecological significance is the ecological service of groundwater percolation that this area provides. And this is an important ecological service provided by areas and catchments which have natural vegetation cover. In fact, the Pranav Sen report also recommends the maintenance of geohydrological features which channelize the rainwater to underground sources. Typically, in these catchment areas, 30 to 35% of water percolates into the ground and contributes to the subsurface flow. The Madhav Chitle Committee report on the Mumbai floods also had pointed out that the soil type, vegetation cover, topographical features of the land surface, and physical surface in the catchment play a key role in influencing runoff process. In this slide, the maps to the left of the slide show the extent of Aarey Milk Colony as indicated in three development plans of Mumbai. The 1964 development plan sanctioned in 1967, the 1981 plan, which was sanctioned in 1991, and the recent RTDP 2016-34. This will provide a historical context to the Aarey issue. The maps show the gradual shrinking of the original Aarey colony area as sanctioned in the three development plans of Mumbai. Since Aarey colony was established, substantial parcels of land were diverted in an ad hoc manner over time for other uses. In the 1981 DP, a large part of Aarey was zoned as a no development zone, which was a low development zone with natural forest cover and vegetation. In 2016 2034 DP, approximately 175 hectares have been excluded from these erstwhile NDZ areas. New developments were proposed in the 2034 DP, such as the metro car shed, metro rehabilitation and resettlement housing, and the proposed zoo. Out of these, the car shed has been moved out recently, which is a good thing. But one is still uncertain about the status of the other reservations that had been made in the RTDP 2016-2034. One needs to also acknowledge that ecological systems are contiguous systems. Aarey Milk Colony is predominantly forested land contiguous with Sanjay Gandhi National Park. The map to the right shows how developments such as Royal Palms and the expansion of Film City into land which was earlier a part of SGNP has resulted in fragmentation of the contiguous forest cover between Sanjay Gandhi National Park and Aarey. if a comprehensive and integrated approach is not undertaken, there is a possibility of further fragmentation and loss of contiguity of forests and natural systems. This could result in habitat loss and also affect the movement of wildlife. This map shows the existing land cover, streams, and watersheds in Aarey colony, which have been overlaid with new reservations which were proposed in this area in the DP 2034, REDP 16 2034. The maps show that land use changes for the proposed metro car shed, zoo, and housing will involve a substantial amount of construction and concretization of land in the catchment area of the Mithi River in particular. It shows specific reservations such as the metro car shed, zoo, and rehabilitation and resettlement housing in the Mithi River catchment. The proposed reservations for the metro car shed, zoo, and rehabilitation housing will involve a substantial amount of construction and concretization of land, increasing the volume of surface water runoff and reducing groundwater percolation. The map shows that many of these areas are still predominantly natural or unbuilt. The recent draft notification now indicates that about 800 acres of Aarey has been proposed to be designated as a reserve forest. However, at this point, it is not clear whether the rehabilitation housing plot has been included or excluded from this notification. We therefore should wait for the government to publish the maps to know for sure how exactly the CTS plots have been subdivided and which areas have been included in the reserve forest designation and which have been excluded. This slide shows the concretization of catchment areas and how this will increase surface runoff, result in an increase in stream energy, resulting in risk of flooding in downstream areas. So some of the maps shows the areas that were flood prone and got flooded in the earlier floods, and these were downstream areas of in the Mithi and Dahisar river catchments. The rivers in Mumbai also flow over a short distance from a hilly terrain almost directly to the tidal region, and this increases the possibility of occurrence of flash floods. The Pranab Sen committee report states that relatively minor disturbances near the origin of the river may result in enhanced erosion rates, fluctuations in hydrological regimes in downstream, silt accumulation rates, and flooding water in lowlands and natural systems of recharge, all of which can result in serious ecological damage in surrounding areas. So therefore, one needs to understand that there is a contiguity between ecological systems, and the impacts of development are not just felt locally, but they are also felt in other areas. So it's not just administrative boundaries that are important. There was also another expert committee report to the Supreme Court in the case of MMRDA versus Jal Biradari and others. And this also refers to how these areas are comparatively steeper areas and upper stretches of the river. And there is a sudden discharge of water in downstream areas, making it prone to floods. There was also a reference to the land filling underway for the metro yard, which in fact altered the natural course of the river, leading to an acute 90-degree turn at the edge of the metro yard, obstructing natural rainwater gradients and the passage of water between Aarey from flowing into the Mithi River. So any kind of diversion, rerouting, channelization due to construction activity affects surface and subsurface hydrology of the river. And proposed developments in Aarey are likely to impact not only areas the surrounding areas in Aarey, but also result in impacts further downstream. Hence, I would like to conclude my presentation by arguing for an integrated ecological planning approach, an integrated planning approach as opposed to piecemeal conservation or development approaches. The first thing that I would like to highlight is, or argue for, is for a comprehensive mapping and evaluation of ecological significance and socio-ecological values of the entire area of Aarey. Here, I would like to ask the question, is there a larger ecosystems perspective in the way Aarey is being conserved, and whether various ecological values and ecosystem services are being recognized and protected? To do this, we have to not only find the most appropriate legal and planning frameworks, but also ensure that these frameworks are effective. The second point I would like to highlight is the is that there is a need for a comprehensive conservation plan for the entire area of Aarey and its protection under various legal frameworks. There is already a draft notification to notify parts of Aarey, largely uninhabited areas of Aarey, which have forest, as reserve forest. In order to conserve and protect the remaining parts of Aarey in a comprehensive manner, various other frameworks could also be explored under other environmental laws. For example, for instance, there are categories such as conservation reserves or community reserve under the Wildlife Protection Act, which could also provide protection to forests and ecosystems in human inhabited landscapes. There is also the framework of ecologically sensitive area under the Environment Protection Act. So I think there's a need to look at a diverse range of legal provisions and frameworks to ensure that these areas, the entire area, is protected. Finally, I would also like to point out that the legal frameworks themselves need to be strengthened rather than diluted, and this seems to be the current trend. Aarey was included in the 2016 ESZ notification that is meant to protect the area around SGMP from an ecological point of view. But while this notification prohibits commercial or industrial related development activities, it in fact permits infrastructure work such as Mumbai Metro, residential needs of local residents, and ecotourism facilities. Now, each of these categories are ambiguous and has resulted in various kinds of loopholes. For instance, large-scale rehabilitation and resettlement projects are still, you know, uh, possible within the ecologically sensitive zone of Aarey. Similarly, ecotourism projects like the proposed zoo or safari may end up commodifying these landscapes or may even displace communities and their livelihoods. Similarly, as past experience has shown, infrastructure works and tourism projects subsequently allow many ancillary activities that are not anticipated earlier. In other words, many of these regulations provide a false sense of environmental security, but little actual protection. Therefore, activities that are permissible ought to be regulated through a meticulous ecological planning process that specifies suitability of permissible uses and the intensity of development based on the nature of their impacts. It's only such a comprehensive approach which can help us save Aarey in a more holistic manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Shweta. That was a great comprehensive overview that you gave us of RA. And one has to understand that although we talk a lot about economy and economics and Bombay being the economic capital, we also have to realize that we have several rivers that pass through this city. There are hillocks. There are uh, the entire system is interconnected. The mangroves, the flooding that is there. So if we tamper with the floodplains, even if you are very far away at BKC, you will definitely have an impact that is going to affect. And if BKC gets affected, or any of our seeps gets affected, or Chakala gets affected, there are businesses that get affected, and there's an economic cost to these things. And to handle all these scenarios, a lot of planning, many, if you'll see with all the developed countries, they invest a lot in planning, they invest a lot in designing of infrastructure in public services. And that is something where we've been sort of going in a very slipshod and rushed manner. The third speaker today is going to present to us a alternative planning perspective that is there, what we call as the Mumbai Metro Master Plan, a plan which is cost effective with better connectivity, and one which does not clutter our already congested arterial roads of Bombay. So the third speaker for today is Mr. Nitin Killawala. He's an award-winning architect. He's also the recipient of prestigious JK Architect of the Year award, along with other national level awards, including the IID and IIA for excellence in architecture and interior design. Nikhil is also a former academic council member at the School of Interior Design, CEPT University, Ahmedabad, and Kamla Raheja Vidyanidhi Institute of Architecture and Environmental Studies. More importantly, Nitin has been involved in the campaign for an integrated transport plan for Mumbai and has been instrumental in revitalizing parks and public spaces around Mumbai. And he has been involved in monitoring and the planning and execution of the metro project right from its inception in 2010, along with various citizen groups. So over to you, Nitin, to share your vision of what is the possibilities that we have even after the situation that we are sitting at. What is it going to be? What is it going to take to declutter our roads?
So before I start, Anand, how much time do I have so that I can plan out?
You have about 20 minutes.
Okay, good enough. So I'll share my screen.
Yes, please.
Straight away.
Also, a reminder to all the other those who have joined in now, that for Shweta as well as Hussein's presentation, please type in your questions and we'll be taking them at the end after Nitin has finished his presentation. Yeah, over to you, Nitin.
Yeah. There are several vital aspects which ought to have been deliberated for good practices of.
Nitin, a little louder, please.
There are so many vital aspects for any public transport project, mass transport project, especially for a capital intensive project like metro rail. It should also provide enough, opportunity to expand and even complement both metro rails as well as the road network, which are existing. So I'll just share my thought on overall master plan and how we can salvage the situation. We have been fighting, not really fighting, we have been requesting government for now almost a decade, since 2010. Partially we did get some success, but now we are in a different scenario because all the roads are, as you can see, the choco-block with all sorts of transport project. So what is the existing alignment? Most of the viewers knows about this, but briefly I'll just run through. We have one line which is in dotted line 3, as you can see over here, and then extreme left blue line, which is line 2. Then we have line 7 on Western Express Highway. Then on the extreme right, line 4, which is Thane Vadala line. And then we have on JVLR, line 6, and line 1, which is already existing on JP Road and Andarikola Road. Now, if you look at this, as Hussain was mentioning, is this a metro alignment plan or our arterial road plan? The blue line, which is line 2, is the link road, which goes up to SV Road and then takes a turn on BKC and then over to San Panvel Road towards Mankhut. The green line, which is line 7, is Western Express Highway. The brown line, line 4, which is Eastern Express Highway, LBS Mark. These are all major arterial roads. And line 6, the most congested, JVLR. So what is really important is these are the arterial roads. As it is, we don't have enough of road space, as mentioned again by Hussain, for public transport, especially buses. So these are all actually are the bus routes where we are having metro, except for line 3, which is going zigzag underground. And you'll be amazed to know this line connects 40 roads, whereas all our elevated routes are taking all prime arterial routes. But sadly, even this line 3, which has virtually just one connection at Marul Naga. Very recently, MMRDA has scrapped BKC station of line 2B. So even that connection is gone. In fact, for line 2B, Kurla connection also, Kurla station also has been scrapped because of a lot of technical issues and space constraints and so on and so forth. So these are very typical of constraints of elevated metro, and therefore we need mix up of elevated as well as underground metro. So we don't disturb existing rail network. Now what we are proposing is something I would say very simple. We have line 3, which is sacrosanct. It connects very well as far as that line in isolation is concerned. Like it connects, Kolaba, Churchgate, CST, Bombay Central, BKC Airport, and now going all the way up to Kanjurmarg. Then we have line 6, which also connects on that road, on JVLR, as I mentioned. So what is more important is by having this, actually there are 6 lines, as I mentioned, line 2A, 2B, line 7, line 4, line 3, and line 6. Out of these 6 lines, in this plan, we are trying to make just 4 lines out of this 6. And how it is done, that will come a little later. Now, while designing this rerouting of these 4 lines, we are also taking care that enough of bus routes are, maintained. So between line 7, which is on a Western Express Highway, and Link Road, which is line 2A, we could connect it at Kandivali, we could connect it at Goregaon, from Oberoi Mall to towards Infinity Mall, or from Lokhandwala complex to JVLR, and so on and so forth. Even for line 1, which is Ghatkopar station, it ends at Ghatkopar station, but there is no space to expand. So maybe between Ghatkopar and Tilak terminus, which is just about 2 kilometers. So these are the ways in which we are trying to even integrate metro with short route of metro buses. We call it metro buses. There could be even circular route, something which has been already done in Churchgate Fountain area. Now, before coming to any change, there is always first question that what about cost and time, which has been spent till date. So we are saying that all this has been known to the planning authorities, known to respective government, but somehow they never, unfortunately, listen to us. So this is in April 2012. April 16, these are the headlines: state plans metro line from Nagar to Mandala 2019. By 2019, we are in 2020 now. And what they proposed, government has promised to roll out over 100 kilometers of metro network in Mumbai before the assembly polls. So these are some kind of misplaced political agenda, which which are inherent to any infrastructure project, especially in Bombay. Then in September, same year 16, government approves Metro 2B and 4. Now they realize it's not possible before 2019. So by 2022. But we are in 20 already. This work has started sometime in 17-18, and you know how much progress has been done. So all this delay is not on the part of the citizens. It is the very nature of our city, which which is very complex to have any elevated structure. Even to construct a small flyover has a lot of issues. Then January 19, 4 metro lines missed deadlines, alleges Congress. It's not just Congress. Everyone alleges that it has to miss the deadline. Whatever deadlines they give for any infrastructure project, whether it is Worli Sea or even skywalks and coastal road, whatever you may say, they are all, there is no respect for how to complete in time, or deliberately this time time is sort of projected in a manner just to get the approval of the project. And this is something really very sad, that MMRDA still has no land for metro car shades, July 19. So while we are embarked upon 6 metro lines, cumulatively it is about 140 kilometers and so many crores of rupees. This is the situation as far as time is concerned. Now look at, how about the cost then? As I mentioned, there are 6 lines under construction. Line 2A, line 3 and line 7 has progressed to some extent. And I would say it's a fait accompli. It's not the best of planning, but anyway, now that is nothing you can do about it. But remaining 3 lines, that is line 2B, line 4 and line 6. They spent till now about 13,000 crores for all these 6 lines, and most of the chunk is for Metro 3. So this also includes cost of Metro 3. Now this remaining line, line 2B, the total project cost is say 11,000 crore. Expenditure incurred is about 200 crores. So what is that? 2%? For line 4, 14,500 crores, spent about 225 crores. 1.5% of the total cost. And line 6, which is 6,700 crores, spent 200 crores, about 3%. So my content is totally different. That if you take, say, for example, line 2B, out of 11,000 crores, they spend only 200 crores. Isn't it wiser to spend remaining 10,700 crores in a proper manner, in a very wise way? If you have, say, a dozen mangoes and one mango is rotten, what do? We don't say we have invested and we eat it up. We just remove it so that other mangoes doesn't get spoiled. Here, precisely that is happening. We have spent some money on a project which is totally ill-planned, I would say. And we are keep on harping about what about the cost, but this is the reality. So still there is a time, at least for these 3 lines, we can tweak these 3 lines and do much better. So very quickly, I'll go by each of these lines. Now talking about line 3, fortunately, when I was looking at pictures of Aarey, which just Shweta showed, I just cannot believe that there could have been a metro yard there. We are very fortunate that metro yard has been shifted from Aarey to Kanju. And all this we are not saying today. In April 12, that time we had said that to reject 2nd and 3rd metro line, when Metro 3 had just started, that time we said that you please connect this line to Charkop. That time line 2 was almost in final stage of planning. Initially they didn't listen, but sometime in 13-14, during the government of Prithviraj Chauhan, he considered our request and made this line 2 from Charkop to Mankut totally underground, with 25,000 crore sanction at that time. But since 2014, as you know, everything got reversed. Then sometime in 17 also, citizens suggest a Metro 7 alternative. Now, what was that alternative? That time, Aarey movement had really taken off. It was absolutely, absurd idea to have a metro shade in a forest. So what we had suggested that time, that you take this line from SIBS towards the left, maybe through JVLR or through Film City Road, but all underground, and then connect somewhere at line 2, somewhere near Goregaon. That was also possible. Then in 19, again we suggested another plan, that scrap Metro 6 route and extend Metro 3 instead. And this was the same thing which we are discussing today. Government also is doing almost the same line, but in a different way. What we had suggested that time was, Marol is a big junction for line 3. And that is the only connection now we have for entire, underground line 3. So you divert that towards Saki Vihar, towards Chandivali, back of Hiranandana Gardens, and then go to Kanju. Again, that time, now we cannot change anything. But these are the projects which are not designed for just one election term. They are the projects for hundreds of years. So we have to have some kind of logic what we do. So what all we are suggesting is, as you can see in this slide, the dotted line which you see on top is now supposed to be line 6, which will be overlapped with or sort of merge with line 3. But instead of doing that, we take sort of U-turn at SIBS and go behind SIBS 7 Hills. So I will not touch not only the Aarey, I will not touch even JVLR. And these are all underground lines. What I am proposing is, so from there you go to 7 Hills. You can connect 7 is a big hospital, government hospital, municipal hospital with large land all around, to Saki Vihar, which is also a very high dense area, Chandivali, then Hiranandan Gardens. All these areas are not only residential, they are big time commercial and white collar office goers. And there's a very dense population which is already there, and they don't have any connectivity to good transport. Then you connect to Hiranandani Hospital. So in this route, I'm actually connecting two major hospitals, Seven Hill Hospital, Hiranandani Hospital. And then you go very quietly under the JVLR and come out at Kanju. Now, what is happening at line 6? Why we are saying to delete this line? For a very simple reason. When you look at Lokhandwala to Kanju, this entire alignment is about 14.5 kilometers. First, you have to come, go over line 2A, which is also planned by MMRT. Then there are slums. You cross over SV Road. Then there is a Jogeshwari railway track. Now, all of us have seen what a mess, it was made when line 1 was constructed on Andheri tracks, on WH. Same things we are repeating again. And as you can see, line 1 and line 6, they're almost going parallel, about 2.5 to 3 kilometers away. So after Jogeshwari rail track, we have our own Metro 7 line. You just jump over that, then jump over Western Express Highway. Again, there's a big flyover way to surpass that. Then congestion of JVLR, and then come towards Aarey and Powai. Now, if you look at this line, which is overlapped, the stretch is about 6 to 7 kilometers. The entire line has no growth possibility on the northern side of JVLR, simply because there is Aarey and then there is the Powai Lake. And Aarey line and Powai Lake, so there is no future growth. And again, that line comes on LBS mark. That junction, now that Radisson Hotel has come up, it's a very chaotic junction. And immediately thereafter, there is a flyover and Vikhroli rail tracks. Now, what sort of planning you do in a just stretch of 14, 15 kilometers, if you have got so many hurdles, it can never be cost effective. We have seen line 1 till almost end of the project, they had projected original cost of 2,300 crores, but it landed up at 4,300 crores. The time was 3 years. It took almost over 6 years. Now, who is responsible for all this? So these are some of the very basic issues. And for that only we say that whatever you optimize the line, and that is possible only if it is underground. We thought of this merging of line 3 and 6 only because line 3 was underground. And whatever plan which I am just showing now, that is also possible because it is proposed as underground rail. Now, what are the advantages? Very quickly, I will just say that this extended route is through ships. These are some of the major landmarks, and then it seamlessly connects to this business hubs of Powai, Vikhroli, etc. Then 2 major hospitals I just covered. So these are some of the real issues, and they are all very, very dense areas. Now, if we don't have line 6, there'll be a lot of questions. How can you just delete one line? But it's a tough decision, no doubt. But there are many, many advantages. You cannot ignore this scenario. These are the recent pictures, and this is how Powai is. Of course, now they've started having a few columns, but if you ignore that, on this, they are proposing elevated metro. Another most important thing in any elevated metro is the topography of the land. Now, this particular stretch is so undulating, it's like a roller coaster ride, that ground along this corridor is very much undulated. And these are the reports from MMRD themselves. These are project reports. The fall or rise of the ground is very steep, more than the permissible gradient for metro line. Hence, height of piers in certain sections of the corridor is more than 30 meters. Now, where they are going to merge this line, 3 with 6, there the alignment is almost at 25 meters. So you're going, you're coming up from almost 15 meters below ground to 25, 20 meters above ground. So this kind of ramp, this kind of connection itself is very cumbersome. Technologically, it may be possible, but these are not the best way to do it. Similarly, when you look at the alignment, in plan, there are many sharp turns and curves along the road. This necessitates provision of curves for metro alignment also. The radius of curves is kept at 125 meter to reduce the property acquisition. Any elevated metro has to have land. You look at line 7 also, though it is on highway, they are stuck mainly because of there is no land available for entry exits for stations, so and so forth. And there are 50 such curves. Now this may be again technically possible, but then you are reducing the speed of the coach for forever. And for what reason? Just you wanted to prove that it can be done elevated. Now, as an architect, many times we always give advantages of the project proposed. Here, I am giving advantages of discontinuation of line 6 after 6. So what could be that? Clearing congested JVLR an opportunity for upgradation of urban infrastructure for these roads which are released. In the process, we are actually releasing 50 kilometers of arterial roads, which are planned now as elevated. Now, again, these are from MMRDA's report only. You can see this flyover and look at the viaduct. There is a 25-meter height. Then there are 3 metro stations planned on this Powai Lake, near Powai Lake. And this is what we are going to see. Actually, this is still a better picture. When you see it at road level, nothing of this sort will be maintained. So these are all monstrous structures. Each elevated station is nothing less than 1 lakh square feet. Then we avoid, sharp alignment also. These are all, as I said, they are just following the existing arterial roads, whether they are curved, whether they are undulated, and it is totally in a mess in that sense. And then, of course, this Vickroli rail track, there's already a flyover, which is choco block all the time. There's hardly any space between flyover and the adjoining building. And wherever there's railway, this is going to happen. You have stay breeze. Where is the cost for this? These are most expensive structures, and it takes a lot of time. And that's why all our elevated metro projects are going beyond schedule. Line 3, it is slightly expensive, but then they have completed 80% of the tunneling work, whereas all these lines are going much, much behind schedule. Now, coming back to line 7, this is the scenario now. Whether this flyover is part of the station or station is part of the flyover, very difficult to distinguish. Then this is the station actually, metro station proposed. This is after Goregaon. Now, this green line which I am showing, presently it goes from Dahisar to T2 terminus via WEH, that is Western Express Highway station, metro station of line 1. And then further it goes and then goes underground and connects to line 3. So what our proposal is, you disconnect this line from JVLR junction to airport, which is about 6.5 kilometers, but turn it on the left side, and we already have by default some piers come up for line 6. Use that and stop this line at SIP station. So connectivity is there with line 3. In any case, right now it is at T2 airport. You will have connectivity at SIPS lines. So we avoid this 7 kilometers of additional elevated metro on Western Express Highway. Now the same line becomes line 2A on the other side of the railways. So these are the points which I was saying. We'll be connecting to existing metro stations which are already planned, whether we like it or not. That is a fait accompli, and we take it in our stride. So from Kasturi Park station to Thakur complex, the route is not more than 2 kilometers, 2 kilometers, 2.5 kilometers, something like that. So very, very short routes. Then from Oberoi Mall Junction to Infinity Mall Junction, from again Lokhandwala to JVLR junction, from JVLR to Andheri station also. So there's fantastic connectivity which you get in the process. And line 2, what we are proposing, line 2A is up to DN Nagar. We again disconnect line 2B for the time being, but connect line 2A, or you extend up to domestic airport. Now from DN Nagar to Santa Cruz bus depot, you have underground line. You create a hub at Santa Cruz depot and some kind of expandability so that it can go further and connect it to domestic airport, which is only 750 meters between Santa Cruz depot and domestic airport. So you have very good connectivity in the process, and then later on you may consider expansion of that line because everything is underground. Now, why I'm saying this, near Juhu airport, there is a height restriction, and height restriction is not just few meters. These are the reports, and in fact, a petition has been filed against this order that they are going ahead with the work in spite of, it was pointed out by AI officials that the permitted top level at Vilepal location is nil, which is zero height. In spite of that, they are going ahead with the work. And SV Road is again one of the most important arterial roads, which goes via JVPD to Link Road. Everywhere you will have these elevated structures at a kilometer distance. So this is Mitibai Junction. If we had elevated metro, this is how it would look. Fortunately, till now, nothing has been done except few columns. So we can still review it and redo it. On SV Road, Santa Cruz, Car, Bandra, that stretch, beautiful trees. And if we have elevated metro, it would be like this. So these are the hardcore realities. And as I said, that we have spent only 1.5 to 2% of the cost. And some of the cost can still be salvaged. But let us review it. We don't need 6 metro lines. Even Delhi has got 8 metro lines spread over 20 years of construction. And in elevated metro, if you have 6 metro lines, you need 6 yards. If you have 8 metro lines, you need 8 yards. You cannot really optimize. And lastly, about line 4, which comes from Kesar Vadauli to Wadala. Here also we are proposing, these are all my phase-wise program, that from Kesar Vadauli to Teen Hath Naka, which is a fairly good amount of work has been done. But from Teen Hath Naka to Wadala, we hold that line for the time being and make a provision for underground metro. So what could be done from Teen Hath Naka to Kanjur Yard? Now this Kanjur Yard is 100 hectares. It's a huge land. And there is a possibility of getting some more land because there are some encroachment, etc. over there. So we can even make this yard much more optimized. And these are the junctions which I'm talking about: Teen Hath Junction and Amar Mahal Junction. Now, Amar Mahal Junction is like a madhouse in any case. So on top of that, this pink line is the metro alignment. So if we have to have underground, if not today, if you don't have money, maybe you can phase it out. Because what is happening after this junction, when you look at Kurla, Wadala, etc., they are more or less part of central Mumbai. They already have opportunity, or they have the facility of getting a harbour line, central railway, Dadar, that's all connected with Western Railway. They're not very large distance, and they're not too far from the main city, or not too far from even Thane. So it will have that metro, but you do it in second phase. So what all, just to summarize, what I'm saying is how efficient we can make the route. For example, line 7, which will have Dahisar to Kolaba connectivity, if we follow this plan, with just one interchange at SIP station, and then you can go there. Then another option, Dahisar to Thane or Kesar Vadauli, with 2 interchange, one at SIPS and other one at Kanjur Marg. You can connect easily. Then for line 2 and 2B, it was always line 2, but for some reason, this government, or rather former government, made it into two parts, 2 and 2B. So for me, line is only one, line 2. So Dahisar to Killawala, via domestic airport, you get line 3 and you go to Killawala with only one interchange at domestic airport. And then Dahisar to even Thane, when you want to go from Dahisar all the way to Thane, with again two interchange, one at domestic airport, other one at Kanjurmarg. So you look at the possibility of connectivity. Right now, line 3 has only one connection. Can you just believe 33.5 kilometer underground rail with only one connectivity at Marol, at Marol Naka, which is a very short route of line 1, which doesn't connect really everywhere. And then for line 4, Thane to Killawala. So you come from with just one interchange at Kanju. So what we are trying to do is we are deleting some lines, so we'll get credit for whatever cost which we save on that, and we spend wisely. So roughly, I'll not go into the detail of this, but the new alignment which I just mentioned to you is coming to about 23.5 kilometers of additional underground line, including for line 3 extension, and then 3 kilometers elevated line. So it is easily doable and will be able to finish in time. Cost is something which can be negotiated, which we can work out. And these are, we have to take care of, cost benefit. These metro lines are not necessarily will be largely used by you and me, but our children's grandchildren. So we have to think in that perspective. And then look at what is happening all over the world. Everyone has seen this. And these are all underground. And look at the connectivity. You are creating entire weaving, another parallel city underground. Now, I'm not suggesting that. Whatever has happened has happened. But let us salvage the situation, which is doable. Let us not repeat the mistake. We have made a blunder in designing even monorail. What has happened? The project is scrapped. Even skywalks. We have spent 700 crores. 50 out of 70, 50 skywalks are shut. But they ruined our arterial roads, our streets, everything. And then why can't we have a vision where let's celebrate even underground metro or any metro station as some kind of public space. Chandni Chowk in Delhi was a dying neighborhood. Just because of underground metro under Chandni Chowk, the entire area got revamped. And at road level, it just occupies some kind of footpath space for entering. So just to summarize, I'll just give 4 or 5 points that whatever I've discussed about, we are proposing 4 lines which will merge out of existing 6 under construction. And then there are only 2 metro yards at 2 edges of the, one at Charkop, other one at Kanju, which is already planned. Then 50 kilometers of major arterial roads will be regained by not doing elevated metros over there for better bus routes and other green parameters like cycling track and pedestrianization, greenery, whatever. So all that scope is there, at least to upgrade those roads. Then saving pristine Aarey stretch, which I talked about, and Powai Lake promenade. So that will be kept intact. And then introduction of at least 10 to 12 metro bus route. I forgot to mention about Kanjuria. The land is so big that we can have a huge parking hub, car parking. So car parks, people can come from Rabale, Airoli, which is 5 to 6 kilometers away, and they can get options to go to various directions in mainland city. And then avoiding complex and most expensive bridges, rail bridges or metro bridges, which we have to construct as per present plan. And they are crossing over line 2A, 7, 6, and 4. All that will be eliminated. There are 2 rail tracks, one at Jogeshwari, other one at Vikroli, that will be eliminated. And then several major flyovers and intersections. They are also very complex. Right now, what we see, bahut kaam ho gaya, wo jo bahut kaam hua, and that is the most simple work they have done. Middle of the road, they have done this, just the columns. And lastly, avoiding sensitive clearances like airport, even fire clearances. It is everything is in a very shoddy manner. If you don't find 200-meter wide Western Express Highway enough, make it 230 feet wide by one circular. If you have some planning issues of DCR, then make it SPA. So entire metro alignment across Mumbai, that is all SPA, Special Planning Authority. If you don't have fire permission, debar from getting fire permission. So these are not the way knee-jerk reaction you make a project. And even elevated metro is also not cheap. It is also very expensive. So the idea is to have, first you put metro in right perspective, and then connect it with buses, connect it with existing stations, connect it with existing bus depots. Today, actually, we are selling our bus depots. Look at Mahim bus depot. Look at Kurla bus depot. They're all sold. Yogeshwari bus depot. They're large lands and they are all scattered all around. So we can even connect these major hubs. So I think I have overshot my time, but then if there's any questions, thank you.
No, but Nitin, what you've covered is very, very important. I think, it sort of brought together what Hussain was talking about. What he was talking about, how in a very, very congested and human, dominated landscape like Bombay, we need to consider the low cost of transportation and mobility. We have to connect, access at various places. So whether it is buses, whether it is cycling, whether it is walking, whether it is underground metro, all these things need to be integrated into one master plan. And cost has to be a major overriding factor in that. The cost to the citizen and the cost in the long term that is also there. So thank you for showing us possibilities that there are. I think some projects have been just 2% or 3% have been done. We can go back to our drawing board, as you said, and consider that is there. The other thing that Hussain also mentioned is that land use patterns, which encourage walking and cycling, and provide easy access to public transportation. I think that's very important. If you go to London, if you go to New York, you will see that 2 metro stations are just walking distance from one and the other, or there is a bus stand that is available the minute you get out. And buses are never going to be redundant. Whether you have even after you have 14 metro lines, you will need connectivity between one metro to the other. So circular or and with minimum costs that are there. The other thing that we need to understand is that the public transport buses actually reduces traffic on the road, but it is never going to take away the cars from the road. The minute you take away some cars, there are others who are going to, and usually it's not the car owners who shift to the metros. It is the railway people or, people who walk. So bus transportation is essential. That will remain as an essential thing. And we need to make an integrated plan to this whole piecemeal approach of development that is being taken, that is there. What Shweta pointed out is that that's exactly what we need to understand, that there is a hydrology that is in place. We are a city, dissected by multiple rivers that are there. And while we are making our metro stations, while we are making our, depots, metro depots, or even railway extension plans that might be there, we need to take all these things into consideration, that we have a larger coastal area that is there. There are communities whose lives are dependent on those, whether there are the tribal communities of Aarey or whether they're the fishing communities of the coastal area. While doing all this, we also have to realize that the same landscape, the Aarey landscape, is a leopard landscape. It's not a leopard that lives in Sanjay Gandhi National Parks and comes to hunt in the Aarey. There are residential leopards which live in that landscape. There are pythons that breed in those landscapes, or there are fishes which migrate from the sea into the Mithi River, into the Oshiwara River to lay their eggs. And there are communities who are dependent on that. There are cultural interactions that are there with these places. So having said that, shall we jump into the questions? We have a whole interesting line of questions that are there. So I'll first start with Hussain. If you can unmute yourself, Hussain. The first question is for you.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting question. That is just 1 second. So the person says that I completely agree with the point made that metro will not necessarily reduce number of vehicles on the road. That being said, is there any hope of reducing vehicles using purely planning as Mumbai is has an aspirational population which continues to purchase vehicles and fill up any spaces that public transport free up. So what's your take on that?
No, yeah, that's an important question. I didn't kind of elaborate too much on that during my presentation, but I think the key really is that, of course, when people can afford cars, they will use cars. But there are there are certain natural disincentives for using cars, and one of them is called congestion. When roads are congested, you think twice before taking your car out. And traffic planners generally tend to think about congestion as probably the greatest evil that plagues the city, which is, which actually is not such a terrible thing. And typically the way to deal with congestion is to build more roads. So you widen roads or you build additional links and so on, which in fact induces traffic. The only way you're going to get people to discourage people from using private automobiles, even two-wheelers for that matter, and move to public transport is if you first of all improve the quality of public transport. What is happening in Mumbai today is that you are disinvesting from public transport and you invest only in private transport or in metros and so on, which means that public transport gets overcrowded, buses move slowly, trains are highly congested, so people don't want to use those modes and they choose private modes, right? In fact, the opposite should be the approach. Another way, and then probably the most important of disincentivizing use of cars, is to take away road space from cars, which can be done by dedicated bus corridors. What bus corridors do, in contrast to elevated metros, is that they take a lane away from your freeway, and you only run buses on. So what happens is, and if you look at the capacity of a lane during peak hours, if you have a dedicated bus corridor versus if you have cars running all over the freeway, you will find that it has a great output as compared to a car only road. You will literally find that cars are stuck in traffic and buses are moving at a rapid pace because that's the only thing that's moving on the corridor, which really increases the efficiency of the roads. So that is one thing. What we really need, and this should definitely be taken up very seriously by transport, transport in terms of transport policy in Mumbai, is a kind of a comprehensive car substitution plan, which would include bus corridors on all arterial roads, your Western Express Highway, East Express Highway, JVLR, SCLR, you run a dedicated bus corridor. You have congestion pricing and parking charges, on-street parking charges, where the revenue generated from these congestion charges and parking charges are then rerouted to improvements in public transport, which will ensure that public transport quality is good enough to encourage people to go there, and private cars use become expensive enough to discourage people from going there. It is very much a planning solution. It is there is no it cannot be done by through by telling people convincing people not to use a car. It will have to be done through policy.
So also, let's say we again take the example of New York, having a single transport authority, which looks at all the forms of transport rather than these different bodies who don't talk or communicate with each other. And that's why they make things which are completely sort of independent with each other. I think that also could be one of the other realignment of governance that is there. The next question is to Nitin.
Sure.
I request all the speakers to keep your answers a little short. We have a whole list of questions which have come up.
Okay.
Also, to the persons who asked the questions, we will, in case we run out of time, we will definitely answer all these questions and they will be posted out on the Aarey Conservation Group page, as well as it will be put out on media. So please be assured that we will be passing the questions on to the panelists and they would answer them and we will put them out on social media so that they are available for you. So Nitin, the next question is to you. That there are salt pans on Kanjurmarg site even today, but there is a claim that it has hardened over 15 years, and now there is bedrock at 2 meters. Could you clarify whether it is rocky land or is it marshy land?
Well, the fact is, the soil report says that there is a.
We can't hear you, Nitin. A little louder.
The soil reports says that they hit the rock at 2 meters depth. But when you talk of salt pans, they are across the Eastern Express Highway. What we are talking of the land which is on, say, western side of the highway, not the eastern part of the highway.
Right.
So so
it's an large undivided plot number.
Same government is doing earth filling in middle of the sea. So there is no argument at all. And if you walk across this Aarey land, Aarey area, even today it is very difficult to walk. So there is no argument to me.
Right.
These are all technical issues which can be overcome without much of time, without much of cost.
Okay, I'll move to the next question. That's again to you, Nitin. Do you think it is possible to have an underground metro for the entire city of Mumbai, knowing that the lines on arterial roads will hamper the residential buildings on them?
Well, they are all planned out in a manner which doesn't affect existing buildings, and that they are doing it very successfully.
We can't hear you. Can you?
They're already done for line 3,
right,
in one of the most congested areas. So
right.
Some buildings could be affected. I'm not denying that, but at least your arterial roads are kept intact, no? And then you have fantastic connectivity, which is more important.
So that's a connected question to that. Is that so? Elevated roads will hamper further expansion because of lack of space. So then, can there be 2-level underground metros that could be there?
Well, they can crisscross 2 levels.
Okay.
In Delhi at Connaught Place, there are 3 metro lines. It's the main hub. 3
Yes.
metro lines ka junction is under Connaught Place.
Correct.
So it's doable. In fact,
Absolutely.
that is the advantage. Instead of going one on top of the other, you're going one below the
one
other.
under the other.
Yeah.
Great. The next question is about the technicality of the Metro 3 and Metro 6. Metro Line 3 has got 9 coaches and Metro Line 6 has 6 coaches. If Line 3 goes on Line 6 route, what will be the impact of the station length of Line 6 and the running length between stations?
So naturally, those stations will have to be elongated to 9 coaches. That's what they're doing. They'll have to elongate those. I think there are 5 stations in that stretch, which will have to be designed for 9 coaches. It is as simple as that.
But also the technical committee had recommended that the specifications of rake and the signaling system between 3 and 9 should be kept the same. Is that also true?
No, so that was the earlier scenario.
Right.
It can be modified. No, signals are not put up.
Right.
So you just mentioned about various authorities. Even in metro, we have 2 authorities. One is MMRD, other one is MMRCL.
Right.
So till now, there was no cohesion at all.
Right.
Now at least there are some hopes that they will work together. As a matter of fact, even they had different coach suppliers for elevated metros and for underground metros from totally different companies.
And in fact, Metro 1, the ownership is also between 3 different owners.
Exactly.
And there is in fact a French company which has a 5% stake in that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, all these agencies are creating a lot of confusion and lack of communication also. The next question is, okay, this is very, very interesting and very critical also, that can underground metro provide a solution to electricity failure like we faced recently? An activist is opposing underground metro idea, Mr. Girish Raut. He is opposing the overall project, but recently pointed out the power failure incident. So what happens in such a case, or flooding for that matter, if I can add to the question?
Well, there is a perception that underground metros are constructed like a basement.
Right.
It is not a basement. It's a tunnel technology. Even again, I'll refer to Coastal Road project where they got under sea tunnel. So they are done with certain technology, which are foolproof. No doubt it needs certain ventilation, and all these aspects are well taken into account. And this is happening all over the world. So if there's an electrical failure, it could be even for elevated, no? And we
Right.
had seen in recent times, there was a small fire in monorail. You see the havoc which it had created. But here, all the provisions are made. And that's why it is slightly more expensive than elevated.
The next question, Shweta, if you can unmute yourself. Shweta, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned about making a comprehensive policy plan for Aarey. So what are the given the hydrology and the slope of the place, which are, do you think, the areas that might be most affected if a large construction, whether it is the RNR or whether it is the zoo or whether it is a metro bhavan, any of these constructions coming into the floodplains, what are the impacts that the city will be facing, and what are the impacts that by saving that those spaces, not having them in RA, what are the advantages that you can see for that?
Yeah, I think, like I said, that all these developments in the proposed RDDP, in the sanctioned RDDP, are in the catchment area of the Mithi River. It's not a floodplain. I think people are mistaken
Sorry,
when they call it
catchment
a
area.
floodplain.
My
It is the catchment area of the Mithi River. And in fact, all these are also in the forested areas, the hilly slopes where the first order streams originate. So it's the area where these, streams and rivers originate, and it's highly ecologically sensitive. So any kind of construction here or deforestation, and as I said, the obstruction of drainage channels is likely to have flooding effects in downstream areas in the Mithi River, which is already quite sensitive and prone to flooding. So I think it's a welcome decision to move the metro car shed, definitely. But I think the metro bhavan and again the R&R housing, which we are not sure that they are part of this forest, this reserve forest notification, draft notification. So many of these areas, I think we only have to wait till they publish the final plans to actually overlay them and see which of these areas have actually been included, which have been excluded, which are the areas that are still vulnerable, because it is all ecologically sensitive areas. Even the valley floors between the hillocks, which are not forested, have marshlands, which are adjacent to the natural streams, and these are actually used for paddy cultivation by the Adivasi community. So these are also ecologically sensitive areas in the catchment. So it's important
and there
to
would be
conserve.
economic losses also if these things are
Exactly. So there'll be various kinds of impacts. So I think the ecological services that these various landscapes provide, not just areas where there is probably just forests or vegetation. Like I think I also mentioned that there are different kinds of ecological systems in Aarey. They are all interconnected and they are all part of that larger hydrological system and regime. So I think it's important to first understand this and then plan comprehensively. So I think we've got, I mean, it's a victory. I definitely think we need to celebrate that the car shed has been moved out because it was causing, grave ecological impacts. But I think there is a lot more that needs to be achieved, and that is something that we need to work towards.
right. Just to clarify for those who are not aware about what ecological services are, things like carbon sequestration, when plants absorb carbon dioxide, and reduce the air level of pollution and control the temperature of the city, or the pollination services that they give us, or the water that plants and grasslands hold, preventing flooding in the downstream areas, the food provisioning that happens because of pollination that is there. These all would be, or fishing grounds or breeding grounds that are available. These are all considered as ecological services that are there. Most of the times we don't put an economic cost to it and it doesn't get calculated into the GDP, but these are very, very important for the survival of the city as well. The next question is to you, Hussain. We had covered it a little briefly, but if you can add a little more point, was that could the alignment of the metro lines along arterial roads be a result of lack of cooperation between our government agencies? And what is the solution in that?
Well, I think, of course, there is a kind of a problem in terms of the lack of coordination between agencies. We have, the planner Shirish Patel calls our planning system as being balkanized, broken up into so many different authorities and agencies that coordination becomes very difficult and so on. The thing is, I think what's more important though is to think about the accountability of these bodies. I mean, Aarey is a great example. If you have a planning authority which is also your municipal authority, and if your government systems are responsive to electoral pressures, you can make political changes. Whereas if you're dealing with bureaucracies, it's a whole different game altogether. That apart, I think one of the reasons why metros are on arterial roads is not so much because of the various agencies. It has more to do with real estate. Metros, if you look at, for instance, I mean, I would request people to check out the various kinds of reports that have been put out in recent years by real estate consulting firms in terms of land values in Mumbai and how they have changed as a result of these infrastructure projects. And it's enlightening reading. You see how projects are have specific impacts on the way in which land values change in the city, and that has a huge role to play. So if you look at the Metro Line 2, I think the Link Road, that line actually connects all the malls on the, somebody was I think was pointing it out earlier, that connects all the malls that are being built there. There are many large redevelopment projects that are coming up there. So that's a large part of the logic behind metros on arterial roads.
Right. Nitin, there's a very interesting question, and I think we addressed it a little, but I'm going to re-highlight it, or spotlight it. That now, suppose the master plan that you mentioned, what happens to the RA ramp? How does it impact that, and whether the current plan is the design that you're suggesting, will that completely prevent having the ramp in RA? And is it just like a little strip of land? What's your take on that?
And naturally, if they accept this underground plan, then there is no question of ramp. It just very quietly takes a turn behind sieves. In fact, I mentioned that I will not be entering RA at all. Even I will not be touching JVLR.
Okay.
If it is underground. Now, talking about this ramp, it has been initially designed for underground to surface level because of proposed metro yard. Now, metro yard is not there, but still I had to go up. Earlier, the connection was like a manual connection. There were two stations. There were one station planned also within RA, on the periphery of the RA. And then through staircases, escalators, skywalks, whatever, they were to connect it with SIF station of line 6. That was also very crudely done. Now, there is no pedestrian movement. It's just this metro coach has to go all the way up to almost 25 meters. So it is doable, but it's a very absurd kind of situation. So there are ways and means of doing that. Maybe we take it underground further and then have ramp. That is also another possibility. There is one large chunk of land which is occupied by NSG, which originally that was also actually RA, but that may be perhaps easier. So these are the questions, but I'm not even looking at it. I would prefer that we have a dedicated line which goes very quietly and serves maximum purpose. So now what is happening, though we are merging this line, but for no reason, those 5 stations, of course, they will have some option. They can go to Lokhandwala or they can go to Kolaba. But it is going to be disaster. What do you do at Victoria tracks? What do you do crossing on line 7? What do you do at Powai Lake? At the same time, we are not serving a large chunk of probable commuters in Chandivali and Seven Hills Hospital, Saki Vihar, etc.
Absolutely. So that's very important. That connecting public services like hospitals, protection of the frontage, the promenade of Powai. These are some of the things which are very critical. It's not just about one thing. Each of these parts are connected. I had a few anecdotes to share with you that when you're talking in terms of costs and savings that are there, the Atal tunnel that was recently inaugurated, which is connecting the Rohtang Pass in Himachal Pradesh to the Leh Manali highway in Ladakh. It's a 9-kilometer long tunnel below the Himalaya and connects to very, very important landscapes. And the cost of that was 3,200 crores. Okay, and very, very strategically important in terms of protecting India from the Chinese invasions. The cost of the 9.98-kilometer coastal road is 13,000 crores. Right? So now consider 9 kilometers of tunneling through the Himalaya is costing 3,200 crores. And then we have a similar thing on elevated in the sea, and it's costing 13,000, almost 4 times higher. And utility wise, it is taking only 1.7% of Bombay's population. It's transporting through that cost, whether that cost is acceptable to Bombay citizens. Second, I'd like to highlight is that, of course, on an important scale, we had the Mars mission, which went from planet Earth to planet Mars, and that costed 450 crore rupees only. Consider the distance that they traveled, the technology, the amount of time that was spent behind it, and it was 450 crores, and we are connecting 9 kilometers, at a debt of 13,000 crores. And on a expense basis, what Hussain says as to what are we going to invest in? There are 50 Project Tiger reserves in India, about 15 elephant tiger reserves in the country. The entire budget for 2020-21 of Project Tiger is just 300 crores for protecting from where rivers are originating, where there are great forests that are present, such great biodiversity that is there. We are just spending 300 crores for 50 tiger reserves and more. And a Kasar Vadavali, 4A, that is there, 2.7 kilometers of the 4A metro is costing 497 crore rupees. And that's a debt, that's a net debt that we are incurring. So if we are constantly talking about debts and expenses, these forests are giving us much more revenue, much more ecological values.
I think Anand has some technical issues. Okay. I think there was Nitin, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear.
There's one question which let me just read it out.
Yeah.
So till Anand gets back online. To Nitinji or Anandji, excellent information shared. How do you propose to take the recommendation ahead? Will it be through some individual or an organization or a PIL? Are you a technical committee of the government?
No, I am not on any committee of the government, but we need to pressurize the government only. We don't want to go into another litigation or legal recourse, because these are all planning issues. And why we went to courts earlier, because earlier government was just refused to listen. So there was no recourse left but to go legal route. Here, I think at least I have some hopes, and through the many resident associations and organizations who are collectively, suggesting whatever we are saying. And if whatever is suggested, if there are any flaws in it, these are massive projects. One can always look into it. So we are still talking at conceptual level, but it's doable. That's what I'm trying to say. When they can have just a small instance of this ramp, which we're discussing about, can go to any length, and first of all, this ramp cannot be on a curve. Here, I think immediately it starts off the curve. So all these issues are technical issues which can be perhaps resolved. But what is more important is the priority, priority of the government. You cannot have 140 kilometers of metro in a short time. That is quite absurd. So whatever you do it properly, make in use, you learn from that and move forward.
So, Nitin, I think I can ask you a question. I mean, one thing that that we see in metro systems, let's say in the inner city of Paris or in Manhattan or in places where that have well-functioning metro systems, is that the station densities are very high, which means that basically you can walk to at least one or two metro stations from any point in that area, and usually these are also the central business district of the city. And in what is happening in our metro master plan is that there is the island city, which would be the equivalent of a Manhattan or in a city of Paris, is actually just has one route. The metro line 3, and the number of stations, if you count, if you include the suburban railway stations and the metro stations and the monorail stations, they are still less, almost 1/3 of the station density as compared to these other cities. So what is really, what would be the kind of logic behind the larger metro conceptualization of the metro system in Mumbai? If I were to ask you, what is behind the master plan, not behind this line or that line, but the master plan itself, how would you think about that?
See, frankly, they are also going by density, and then especially in elevated metros, about the space. Now, for example, in line 2B from Bandra station, which is near Masjid, to BKC, there is no station because there is no building only. Where do you have station? But that entire stretch is almost over 2 kilometers without any stations. But at the same time, when you look at Flora Fountain to CST, we have got 2 stations, which are again at walkable distance. Again, coming back to line 2B, we have only 750 meters between, say, Homeopathic College Junction and Mithibai Junction, or near KRVI and Mithibai Junction. It's only about 750 meters. So, there is some kind of thumb rule that every kilometer there should be a station. But in Bombay, because most of the lines are, or rather all lines are elevated, they're going as per the space available. And we have also seen that they very casually shift the stations also. If somebody is a little, influential or powerful, they say, I don't want this nonsense in front of my house. So they shift also. So, well, this thing do happen in our kind of things. You're muted, actually.
Yeah. Also, I mean, there's another thing that we see is that the way in which these metro stations, land on the street. So, for instance, the Andheri station, the east side, the metro line, actually, there's a very narrow street, and the metro columns take over that entire street. And today, that street is in a kind of a very depressing state because of that. In many cases, the metro columns land on pavements, and then that restricts pedestrian movement. And I think I'd seen a presentation that you had made long back, where you were kind of describing the way in which these metro stations are planned, and those are essentially problems of elevating the metro. Is there, I mean, is there going to be an improvement in elevated metro stations as compared to Metro Line 1 in other routes, or is it going to be the same essentially?
It will be worse because Metro Line 1 stations are smaller. They are for 6 coaches. For longer routes, we got 9 coaches. But Hussain, actually, it is more of mindset of the government that you look at housing, look at any stations, or there is airport station on Metro Line 1, which is just 200 meters away from T2 terminus. There is no virtual comparison. That sort of thing. At the same time, really surprised that some of the influential guys from our own city, they don't care a damn about what is really happening outside their four walls. On the other side, the huge chunk of people, they're so much stressed with their just daily survival. So for them, anything is something is better than nothing. You know, that's the attitude. So I was talking about that rotten mango, which was covered in a gift wrap. Nobody knew what sort of it is because all sorts of hopes are created. But now we have seen all the worst experiences, you know, right from Skywalk to monorail to even Metro One. You don't take pride in it. Okay, you are connected. See, in Bombay, everything will work. Even rickshawala is also doing, you know, successful in that sense. But then that's not the right way to do it. And we're discussing about these cars and you know, metros and all that. Unless we have metros which is better than my car, if you don't have that kind of attitude, nobody will patronize. So that is how I look at it. That's why this is an investment. This is not expensive cost or all that. It is investment where you don't see you know, investment on your returns. It is the social cost and cost benefit which you sort of you know, cherish over a long period of time. Yeah, and Anand is back.
Yeah,
Anand?
sorry. You can hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So thank you to all the three speakers for you know, highlighting the various aspects that are there. I think this is not a one way or one time interaction. We will have to have many more of these you know, interactions that are going on, and we will be having them as we go on further up. But the point that each one of them have raised is that we need to integrate the planning that is there. Citizens need to be involved. If you have ideas like Nitin had them, please share them with either the Aarey Conservation Group, or you can directly send them up to the government agencies, also to the you know, your local candidates, or to the Chief Minister and the Environment Minister. Currently, I think Aditya Thackeray is now heading the entire metro operations for the entire of Maharashtra state. So definitely you can, you need to be involved. You need to, you know, engage with the democratic process, as we started off by saying. And finally, today's the main highlights is that there are certain projects which might be failed projects, which might have, you know, taken their own reason, whatever reasons they were that they were designed with. But if citizens engage you know, in the process, we can co-create and we can easily, you know, build up on the kind of future resources and infrastructure that we want. The natural systems that are there, our rivers, our creeks, our mangroves that are there, our coastal front that is there, we can definitely conserve them. We can definitely protect Aarey, and the more we engage, the more expertise that we involve, whether it is in designing, whether it is in architectural things, in geology, in energy conservation, all these aspects need to be brought in. And please do keep sharing ideas, keep up the pressure that is there. We have managed to achieve this much all together, and I think if we keep pushing for it, we can definitely push out all these unnecessary infrastructural projects that are there into outside, into other parts of the city. But again, with planning, interlinking is required. We need to link our metros with each other. The connectivity, they should not be disconnected from each other. So I think we need to, you know, push in for that. Any concluding statements, Nitin or Shweta, Hussain, that you would like to say? Otherwise,
No, I think I'm fine.
I have just one suggestion, which actually you also touched upon, about single planning authority as far as public transport is concerned. You know, Delhi has got Delhi Arts Commission. Why can't we have urban design authority or some sort of thing, which will actually coordinate all public transport modes? And that is, I think, very, very important. And while doing this, we can also think of we are not even discussing about the aesthetical part of all these projects, which has a huge potential. So just single planning authority for public transport.
So Nitin, one question that sort of is partly unanswered is that suppose these ideas that you suggest are implemented, would that increase the timeline and would that also increase the cost to the city?
No, I don't think so. Again, I'm coming back to the same thing. We have spent out of 10,000 crore, just 2%, 200 crores. So we take it in our stride, no? But don't spend remaining 9,800 crores foolishly. Spend it wisely and with proper planning. See, now when you design say housing scheme with some kind of entry point from the road, so you don't need to make that entry road first, but you plan it out. Now here they've started metro work without metro yards, and then you are in a soup actually. So
fact,
these are some very basic planning parameters.
Right.
It's a common sense, not even planning parameters.
In fact, there were 9 metros which were planned, and the plan was from 2006 to 2021. They all 9 metros should have been completed by now, and only 1 metro is in existence, and all the others are under progress. So I think that shows that we are running behind time, we are running behind schedule. But as Nitin has clearly and all the others have also said, that we need to make a good plan, make an integrated plan, try and combine all the various agencies together and come up with a great plan. So thank you so much everyone for joining us today evening, and thank you Aarey Conservation Group to give me this opportunity to moderate this discussion. All the questions that have been asked and with the answers will be posted for others to watch it, as well as the recording will be available on the Aarey Conservation Group page on Facebook. So you can please have a look at that. Thank you and have a good evening and stay safe.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Anand.
Thanks. Thanks, Shweta.
Everyone.